pastor of this church, Reverend Mincy, and members of the St. Mary's Missionary Baptist Church, and to all of our friends in Facebook land all around this country, we say praise and give glory to God for the many blessings that he has given all of us. We want to welcome you all to this series, If These Cemeteries Could Talk. Oh, the stories they could tell, and the experiences and the circumstances that our people have had to endure. This series is sponsored by the Willow Hill Heritage and Renaissance Center, located at 4235 Willow Hill Road in Portal, Georgia. It is in the old Willow Hill School, originally founded in 1874 during Reconstruction, 9 years after the Civil War. And you can follow us on www.willowhillheritage.org. These tours commemorate the history of African and African Americans in this country, 1619 to 2019. 400 years of history, when a Dutch ship first landed at Port Comfort in Virginia, near Jamestown, which established 246 years of enslavement in this country of African Americans. We want to focus during this commemoration on the African diaspora, where many of our people were taken from their native land, sold into slavery, going to the West Indies, and then coming to these United States of America. The slave trade importation stopped in 1808. However, in-state, in-country, sale and movement of slaves continued until the end of the Civil War. In 1864, General Sherman left Atlanta and on his travels to Savannah, Georgia. One segment of his army, we have the documents in the Nevels Creek Primitive Baptist Church, camped at the Nevels Creek Primitive Baptist Church. Many of slaves followed Sherman's army on its way to Savannah. In fact, 3 of our ancestors related to the Hodges family, Meshach, Nedrach, and Abednego, followed Sherman's army as well. Now, during this travel, many of these strong men would prepare the ways by making roads, bridges, etc. Well, there was a tragedy that happened at Ebenezer Creek in Effingham County, where many of the slaves, women, and children who was following Sherman's army, because the Confederate army was chasing them, a decision was made to take up the Platoon Bridge, and many of the former slaves were drowned at Ebenezer Creek. We will be telling that story as part of this 400-year celebration at the Willow Hill Heritage and Renaissance Center later on in August and in September. As we well know, Georgia was the last of the 13 original colonies, founded in 1733, and initially, Georgia did not have slavery. That was one of the decisions made. But because of the economic success of other areas, by 1750, slavery was allowed in the Savannah, Georgia, and Georgia area. And then come the Declaration of Independence, and many of those who fought in the war were certainly given land in this area. And one such person is James Young, and I want you to remember that name because a lot of the Youngs buried in the St. Mary Baptist Church Cemetery, and those in the Lee Cemetery are connected to this James Young, who was one of the largest slave owners in Bulloch County. In fact, when he died in 1859, all of his slaves were listed because they would be sold. And in those records, I was able to find my slave ancestors as part of that. Also want you to realize that in this area where St. Mary is located is a really important area in Bulloch County history. Bulloch County was founded in 1796 out of Scriven and I believe either Effingham or Bryan County. But Neville's Creek Primitive Baptist Church was founded in 1790, before Bulloch County itself was founded, as well as Union Methodist Church was founded in 1790 as well, before the establishment of Bulloch County. Now, these churches are important because African Americans were members of these churches and were listed on the church records. Many of the Hodges, the Donaldsons, were members of these churches. So they all are important. And when we talk about the area of Bulloch, which is located very near here, and you hear that name, Mary Bulloch, who in 1880 donated some land to St. Mary's Church, but they all are buried up at the Young Bulloch Cemetery. And in that cemetery, Homer Bulloch, who was married to Mary Bulloch, was in the Confederate Army. But his father, Will, was a part of the Revolutionary soldiers, and many of these soldiers were given land after the war. So I wanted to set the stage for you to know that you're here at the crossroads of a very important area in Bulloch County history, an important area in African American history. And so we all thank you for coming out to be a part of this. And I want to caution all of us to remember, lest we forget. At this time, we will take invocation by the pastor of this church, Pastor Mincy.
I'd like to say good morning to everyone here today. I'd like to say greetings to Dr. Jackson, the Willow Hill Heritage and Renaissance Center, to the Bulloch County Historical Society. We thank you for the opportunity to host this event here at St. Mary's Missionary Baptist Church. And we'd like to thank all of our church members and those who participated. Will you bow your heads at this time? Heavenly Father, we thank you for who you are. We thank you for this opportunity that you're giving us to learn more about our history. We pray right now, God, for the society, the Willow Hill Heritage Society, that you continue to cover them as they go in this destination of what they are doing for not just Bulloch County, for those around the world. And we ask you right now, God, for your covering. We ask you for your strength. We ask you for your guidance. And we just thank you for giving us this opportunity to come together to learn more about who we are and learn more about where everyone else stands as far as those in our grave sites. We also pray today as we go visit our grave sites that we reminisce on the time that was spent by those who came before us. And Father, we thank you for just being who you are, and we give you the praise, the honor, and the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Mincy, and we certainly appreciate you being a part of this community and just being in Bulloch County. Since being here, you've done some wonderful things, and we hear about the spirit-filled church services that you have, and you've been instrumental in building this great and beautiful structure. And I was just speaking to my wife today. It's probably one of the largest rural African American church there is, and it may be even in some of the cities as well. So thank you for the work you do, and thank you for letting us be a part of your church service today as we remember those who were members but are now resting. And so we mustn't forget. We mustn't forget. These are the individuals who built the foundation. These are the ones who allow us to be in this great edifice today, the work that they did. And I always heard the old people say, may the work that I've done speak for me. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Deacon Earl Donaldson from the historic First African Baptist Church in Statesboro, Georgia, founded in 1889. It's been there for a long time in the center of the African American community in Statesboro. In fact, Professor William James, who was the founder of William James School in 1907, attended that church. And there was often the emancipation celebrations that we used to have in the African American community. Many of them were celebrated there. Ms. Julia Bryan and others. Julia Pearl Bryan, who was Jean's supervisor, attended there. And also your mother worked as one of the first African American nurses at the Bulloch County Hospital. And I remember as a small lad when my grandfather was there, when they had segregated units in the back, I remember your mother, cousin Gussie, attending to the family. So you have quite a tradition in your own right as a teacher, as a coach, as a runner, track. You certainly have to make your mark as well. And so if you would come in your own way to give us a selection, we thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Music always thrills the soul. It truly is the universal language, and we want to thank you, Deacons, so much for what you do. Now we're going to briefly talk about the history of the St. Mary's Missionary Baptist Church, and as we stated early, since 1880. As I always tell folk, that was not yesterday, Pastor. It wasn't. And so a lot of the information is in your program, if you care to look on. We talked about Mary Blitch, who was married to Homer Blitch, and Homer Blitch was a very wealthy person in the area, associated with James Young, and so he was kind of like the bank for a lot of folk around. He would loan money to them and to buy fertilizers and other kind of objects in the area, farm equipment. And up at Bulloch, there was a large store there where people from Scriven County and Bulloch County, members of the St. Mary Church, would come on Saturday afternoon. I remember my grandfather, Solomon Lee, born in 1892, telling me as a child that they all used to meet up at Bulloch. And I think the Lane family later bought that, and some of that structures are still there, even though in decay. So this was in 1880. Mary Bulloch, her husband Homer Bulloch, donated land for this church. And there was a Inman Bryant, and he's well known in the Missionary Baptist Church because many of these ministers came out of the Greenbrier Missionary Baptist Church in Scriven County. And they were called pioneer ministers because they went around Bulloch, Effingham, and other counties ordaining ministers to be a part. This is post-slavery, to be ministers in the churches. In fact, early after the Civil War, many of the white ministers ordained African American ministers. So Inman Bryant was one of those great ministers. And then the Lawtons, S.B. Lawtons, and others who were in the founding of this church. And I want to call the names of those in the founding of this church with Reverend Inman Bryant and S.B. Lawton, along with 8 other people: William Golden, Davis Thomas, William Moulton, Peter Morgan, Caroline Collins, Cinderella Mempsey, Mary Ann Golden, and Little Thomas. And it's important for us to remember these names because these are the individuals, though small in number, came together to create this church, with the first clerk being Lawsy Lee. Now, Miss Adrena Jackson, who I know very well, was a part of the establishment of the Lee family reunion, who was a member of this church, as many Lees were, was a clerk here for a long time, and currently I understand Miss Parker is the current church clerk. There were several pastors. I believe there have been 6 in the whole history of the church. Their names are L.L. Rainey, who served 2 years, L.H. Lawton, who served 25 years, H.B. Lawton, 29 years, R.F. Thomas, 16 years, Reverend Frank Lewis, who served from 1986 to 2004, Pastor W.D. Kent, who served a number of these churches, St. Mary, Scarborough Grove, and many others in the area. He also was at First African Baptist Church at one time, Deacon. So these were the early members and pastors of the church. Some and our current pastor, obviously, Pastor Mempsey, who was instigating and building this beautiful structure here. Some of our early deacons, Mr. Andrew Stewart, don't I remember him and his hat, his daughters who were members here, who were all school teachers, used to bring them to church. Deacon Eddie Rowe Lee, who's buried over in the Lee Cemetery, a cousin of mine. He was out here, son of Jesse Lee. He was a slave man. His dad was a slave man. Will Smith, who's buried here. Mr. A.B. Slater, who's buried at the Lee Cemetery. Mr. Crawford Tarver, who was a school teacher, who's buried here. Mr. Wallace, some of the Wallaces are here, some of them are buried at the Lee Cemetery. Frank Young, the lemonade man. He used to have lemonade out under the tree, and all that cold, good old lemonade that we would all, on a hot day, settle around to have. And Mr. Miller Williams and E.B. Lee, cousin Jack Lee, who was married to Miss Sarah Agnes Cone, was one of those early deacons, a school bus driver. So was Joseph Davis, who was a school bus driver at Willow Hill and many other places. And Mr. Alexander Bill Washington. Now make notice of Miss Anna Washington, who was born in 1876 and died in 1904. Died in 2000. Well, she lived to be 104 years old. Let me just put it that way. It may not have her date exactly correct. And one of your senior members now, Deacon Benny Gordon, 96 years old, currently a member of this church, and paying homage to Mother Sister Clarice Davis and Sister Aretha Perkins. And we also pay homage to the pastor of this church. Now, St. Mary operated a school here. And those of you who knew Miss Emma Jane Lee, she was one of the teachers here, and there were several others. And many folk in this church also went to Pope's Academy, which was founded by Professor Aaron Pope, who was buried out in this cemetery, for which we will talk about later on today. So these individuals were important. They were trailblazers in the history of this St. Mary Missionary Baptist Church, and we thank God for the legacy that they have given to us. At this time, I don't know how hot it is today, so I'm just going to kind of summarize, so we probably won't be as long in the cemeteries. We certainly going to talk about the Young family. In fact, if you go out there, many individuals are directly or indirectly related to the Young family. So we will certainly be talking about them. The Parker and Ward family, the Wallaces, and the Loves, and all of those are all related. But the primary and central family in this cemetery is the Young family, either directly or indirectly. When we go to the Lee Cemetery, when we leave here, we will be talking about July Butts. And some of you may have read about July Butts in the paper, who was born in Hancock County, was a part of that Back to Africa movement going to Liberia. And many folk, there were already 2 ships in the 1890s from this area that had already gone to Africa and going to Liberia. And so they were preparing for another meeting there. It was in the 1890s, and there were mass meetings there to raise money. So July Butts and many others were part of that movement. And at one point, for whatever reason, I guess the labor force might have been thinning out. And so some of the Caucasian people were angry, and they shot into the meeting and congregation, which intimidated a lot of people, and they got out of the movement. But July Butts and one other family was very interested. They made a decision to sell all of their properties, they had farms there, and came to Savannah, Georgia. That's where the ship was leaving from. Well, because they didn't have enough money, they could not leave on the ship. So he spent some time there, and while there, his mother died, who came with him, born in 1810. And she's buried in the Laurel Grove Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia. However, July Butts brought his family to Bulloch. This is the area named after the Bulloch, but it was still in the census records known as Bulloch. And so he died in 1905, and his wife died the same year, and they're buried in the Lee Cemetery. Now, they had several daughters. They had one daughter named Amy Butts, who married a Wayne Moore, associated with Old Bethel Primitive Baptist Church. They had another daughter named Mattie Butts, who married Meshach Hodges, who was the son of the Elder Washington Hodges, who was a minister of the Banks's Creek Primitive Baptist Church, the second one there, and the first pastor of Old Bethel Primitive Baptist Church. And then they had another daughter named Corinne Butts, who was a school teacher in the area. So the Butts family made their mark here in the community, and so we will look at their graves. And of course, at the Lee Cemetery, we need to talk about Boat Jack. This is John C. Lee, the oldest Lee we know, the patriarch of the Lee family, for which that cemetery is named. He was born in 1817 in South Carolina, sold into slavery in Bulloch County, met his wife Liddy Johnson in Bulloch County, and they married during the era of slavery, and all of their children were born during slavery, and at least 5 of them are buried in the Lee Cemetery. Now, I want to mention Lee also, John C. Lee, because he owned 700 acres of land, which was quite unusual use your post-slavery. He started accumulating this land in 1866. So where the Lee Cemetery is located is the land that he first started to accumulate, and some of this land was from the James Young that we talked about, buried up here in the white James Young in the Lee Cemetery. And this James Young was the Revolutionary War soldier who fought in the Confederacy, was a large landowner and a large slave owner. So he got some of his land, and we found out how much he paid for that land. And I often wonder, where do you get $600 and some right after slavery, 1/7 of the land called? And that was, in my opinion, quite a feat. And some years ago, I was digging in the Lee Cemetery and found their tombstone buried in a lot of dirt. And we know their dates, and we also know the dates of their deaths as well. One last person I want to mention from the Lee Cemetery is called Cow Jack. His name was Jackson Lee, son of John C. Lee. He was born in 1845 during the era of slavery. He had 2 wives, one named Charlotte, the other one named Molly, and he had children by both. But he was a black cowboy, and he herded cattle from this area, crossing the Ogeechee River to Savannah, Georgia. And many people don't know these kind of stories that exist that happen in this area. So at this time, we will entertain some music again, and we will move to the cemetery, and we'll talk about those who are buried there. We need to remember, lest we forget. And we need to pass that on to our children so that they will know a people who was formerly enslaved made important contributions, established churches, established schools, established community, and went on to make their mark in society. And even with all the discrimination, Jim Crow, all the Black Code laws, all of with the rise of the KKK, and many had to run to the north as part of the Great Migration, they still made their mark. So thank you so much, and as we go to march to the cemetery, we will entertain some music by Mr. Earl Donaldson, and thank you all so much for coming out to be a part of this, and I hope when we finish the cemetery here at St. Mary's, you all will join us at the Lee Cemetery. Thank y'all so much. Okay, thank you so much. We're going to start here. This is the beginning, and certainly we need to start with cousin, and I'm calling a lot of these people related to me, cousin Maisie Martin. She was a young, and remember we talk about that connection to the young family. Well, cousin Maisie Martin married a Washington the first time. Her maiden name was John. She married a Alec Washington. And later she married a Ebenezer Lee, and finally a Martin, and that's why her last name here is listed as Martin. And as you go through this line, you're going to have her children. Lucille Lee, who married into the Swinton Fisk family. And you're going to move down and you're going to Grady Love, who married one of her other daughters. And some of them are going to have Washington's last name. Some of them will have Lee last name. The two youngest one, Lucille and Ebenezer Lee Jr., were by Ebenezer Lee Sr., and then the others were by Mr. Washington. And so we want to pay homage to cousin Lucille. She was at, and this is Sister Marjorie's parents here, and Sister Anola. These are their parents, and Sister Gail, and all of those. And so we pay homage because she paid great respect to Willow Hill. And as we travel on down here, this is a grave that I want to stop at and make mention of. And this grave here, if everybody can just move around this way here, okay. This is the grave of little Rosa Marie Washington. She was in my class at the Willow Hill School, and tragically in crossing Highway 25, she was struck and killed. And so we turned out the school that day, and all of us came to St. Mary's Missionary Baptist Church. Now, at that time, they let the children of her class do the funeral services. Miss Dorothy McCrae did the obituary, and I said a poem that day till I remember to this day. And little Rose, I'm going to recite this because I said it at that day of your funeral. The little child has gone to rest, to reign with God forever blessed. Her little tongue will always praise a Savior's love, redeeming grace. Far from this world of sin and strife, she now enjoys a heavenly life, and join to praise and shout and sing, and hear the heavenly arches ring. Her suffering ended with today, and yet breathe her at her close, and breathe the long, long night away. But when the sun in all its states illumined the eastern skies, she passed through glory's morning gate and walked in paradise. And that is what I said over 50 years ago, and to this day I remember it, and I remember her service as if it happened yesterday. And all of us were able to sing, and it was just a fellowship time. But little Rosa, your picture is at Willow Hill. You will be remembered. All right, and this is Miss Watts, another daughter of Miss Maisie, who was a Bulloch County school teacher. She went to Edward's College in Jacksonville, Florida, and came here, and she's buried here, born in 1917. All right, moving over here, this is Mr. Alec Washington, another son. Calvin Washington and little Rose and Mary, these are all her parents here. And all of these here are Washingtons, and all of these are related to Maisie Young. And the last being Grady Love, who married Beatrice Washington. So this whole line is related to them. Now, as we move down this way, this line is related to the Clarence Parker family. But before we go there, I want to turn just around and address Professor Aaron Pope. He's over here in the tomb over here. Now, Professor Pope, as you heard me say earlier, he was the founder of Pope's Academy, and he's buried in this tomb here with his wife, Molly. Now, Molly first married Abram Lee, and all of her children, except two, are by Abram Lee. Abram Lee died around 1903. And then Professor Aaron Polk in the area, a school teacher, a little older, married her and had two children. One was Toussaint Polk. Toussaint Polk was a teacher at the Willow Hill School and taught at other schools and was a principal. And many of you know him in this area. And the other one was Professor Polk and Miss Molly Lee Polk's daughter. They call her Cleo, but her name was Cleopatra. And they also was a school teacher. Now, Professor Polk came from South Carolina to this area here in Bulloch County and established a school. And when we look at the Dugan's report by the state superintendent, we have reference to Polk's Academy in those records from as early as 1915. Okay? So let's call, because all of those born through slavery, he was born in 1861. We want to call his name. Say, Professor Aaron Polk.
Professor Aaron Polk.
We remember you and thank you for what you did.
We remember you and thank you for what you did.
All right, so we're going to go down this way, and this is thick with the young. Oh, I mean, all of this is young, but this is thick. And so good to see all of you all out to be a part of this. And remember, we talked about the Parkers. Clarence Parker, who married Pauline Williams, and all of this is their lineage. Brenda Parker went to William James High School, class of '67, graduating with my sister, Teresa Jackson, and she later married Mr. Alston, who was related to the Littles family from around Fish Trap Church. And of course, Robbie Lee Ward related to the Ward family, and I believe the Wards and Parkers either now or next week been having a family reunion here. So all of these are related. Now, another one I want to mention was Patricia Ann Parker. She was born in '51, and she was another one of my classmates. And moved to New Jersey, died early, so we want to remember them. But the rest of these graves, we're not going to call them all by name, related to the Parker and Ward families. Okay, now we're going to start with the Davis and then move back in this direction. This is the Joseph Davis we talked about, who was a deacon, and he married Miss Clarice Smith, who is the mother of the church currently. Their son, Joseph Davis Jr., and Roosevelt Davis, I remember him well. He drove bus. He was killed in an accident. And their mother, Mamie, who later married Lee, George Lee. And so her first husband was Sip Davis, who served during World War I. So this line here is related to the Davis and the Lees as they married into the Davis, or the Davis married into the Lees. Okay? Now maybe we will go here and then go back there. That way we headed toward the gate. And the reason I want to come in this direction because there's two formerly slaves over here. Okay. Now, the Wallaces, I don't know if the two Wallaces are related. They both came from South Carolina, so I don't know that. But this is related to the Press Wallace family. This is Cecilia Wallace. We dug these graves up. We dug them out. They were all grown over. This is Cecilia Wallace, born in 1859, who died in 1938. She was born to the era of slavery. She had some children over there, Ollie Wallace, and she was married to Press Wallace, okay? Now, I want you, because she was formerly enslaved, I want you to call her name, Cecilia Wallace.
Cecilia Wallace.
We remember you and your ancestors. And her husband, I don't know which one is his grave, but Preston Wallace, born in 1860, died in the 1940s, is here as well. And I believe this is a daughter here. Okay, now, so say Preston Wallace, we remember you.
Preston Wallace, we remember you.
Okay, and again, we also like to remember our soldiers. Paul Daughtry married Bessie Talbert, who was the sister of Crawford Talbert, who was the Bulloch County school teacher. And this is from the World War I era. Crawford Talbot taught at the Mary Jackson School for a number of years, and he taught at other schools in Bulloch County, Georgia. So this is Miss Bessie Daughtry and her husband, and this is Mr. Crawford Talbot. And I believe this is his first wife. I haven't validated that. I've been digging, trying to see if I can see some of the names inscribed on it. So Crawford Talbot was a school teacher, and we remember him as well. Not in enslaved, but did a lot of work in terms of educating students in Bulloch County, Georgia. Say, Crawford Talbot, we remember you.
Crawford Talbot, we remember you.
Okay, now we're gonna circle back around. This whole section here is the young. And recently we lost Medella Young. We lost Annie Young. She was in my class. And these are all children of, I believe it's Emma Young, who married a Lester. Annie Bell Young, who married a Lester. So these are all her children. Arlene, Annie, Maydella, who recently died. And that's the grave of Sip Davis right there, that marker who was in World War I. Sip Davis, who first married Mamie Davis, and then she later married George Lee. So that's why you got the Lee Davis piece connected here. All of these are related to the young Johnson Young, who first married Miss Veronica Young, school teacher, who started teaching at Mount Olive many years, taught at Johnson Grove, taught all around Bulloch County. Went to school in Savannah at Kyler Academy. So this is a very important part. This is Emma Micah, related to the Young family. Tom Youngs, you heard we talk about Deacon Tom Youngs. Here he is there. These are all Frank Youngs, all of them. This is also in the military as well. This, all part of this is the Young family. And this family is connected to the white Youngs buried up at Blitz. Remember I told you James Youngs was a Revolutionary War soldier, a great slave owner. A lot of these are the appendages of what slavery did as it established the names. Okay, now this is the other Wallace. Whether they're related to Press Wallace, this is Grayson Wallace. And he married Anna Higgins, and she was the daughter of Billy Hagan, who was a minister. And she is related to the Lee family. Her mother, Rainey, was a Lee before she married Billy Hagan. Okay? And she was the lady that lived to be 104 years old and had a lot of history that she left with us. She later, in her later life, moved over to Scriven County. Okay, now let's go here. Dr. Clemens. Many of you knew Dr. Clemens. He was one of maybe the second or third African American doctor in Bulloch County. Dr. Thurman Clemens and his wife currently still living. And we pay respect to this man because a lot of folk passed and was blessed by his medical knowledge. Want to also acknowledge his daughter, Tammy Yvette Clemens, died early, but she was a doctor of podiatric medicine, podiatry, foot doctor, and so she is buried here as well. And two of his current daughters are practicing in Statesboro. One is a nurse practitioner, and I believe the other one is a doctor. So medicine has been in Dr. Clemens' family, You left your mark, sir. May the work you've done speak for you. It's speaking. Okay, and these are the Gordons, and I want to mention that because Mr. Gordon is now 96 years old. He's not in this graveyard. I told everybody, let's don't put him here. Let's let him get 96 years old. But we recognize him. His wife, Miss Eloise Kent, she left in 2012, but he was born in 23, and he's still here. And there are a few other graves of the soldiers down there, and so that's probably all we will do here because it's getting warm and want to do the Lee Cemetery. Lee Cemetery is really important. Okay? So thank y'all so much, and we say rest in peace, all of you soldiers who have made a pathway for all of us. We thank you. Any questions, anybody? A good summary, and at some point we're going to get together. We have another soldier over there. That's Willie Jenkins, soldier. Don't want to forget our soldiers. Now, I also want to emphasize to all of us the importance of keeping our cemeteries clean. These graves are covering over, and I got a Hispanic guy had the team though to come out and dig these graves out. So let that not be our legacy. Let's come back and take care of our grave site.